Hello everyone, welcome, happy Sexual Health Week. Today we have got a really exciting video where we are talking to Mencap. We've got two lovely people from Mencap. We've got Richard and we've got Tammy, and we're talking today about why relationships and sex education is important, and specifically we're speaking about relationships and sex education for people with disabilities and special educational needs. So my name is Amber. I have worked for Brook for a couple of years now. I work with young people teaching relationships and sex education in schools, and I also train professionals. I work with parents and families, and I teach lots of young people with disabilities as well. So that's what I do, and I work within Brook for that. Richard, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, my name's Richard. I work for Mencap for 12 years. My job role is post support assistant and also a co-chair for the group at Mencap.
Thank you so much. And we've also got Tammy.
Hi, I'm Tammy, and I've worked for Mencap for just over a year and a half now, and I do pretty much the same job as you. I'm out training sex ed, relationship education in schools, day centres for all people with a learning disability. Also work with parents and professionals just to give training and guidance around RSE.
Amazing, thank you. And the way that this video is going to work is we've got myself, Richard and Tammy, and we are just having a casual chat basically about all things relationships and sex related. We've got a few questions that we're going to chat about. So yeah, enjoy. I'm going to pop this now into gallery view so I can see everyone. The first question that I thought we could tackle is why RSE is so important. It's that big question, why RSE is important for everyone, including people with disabilities. What do we think?
I think it's important so people understand what is being taught, and without education, they will not understand what being talking about. And may do the wrong thing. Without education, people could get into trouble. They need the right information to know what is right and wrong.
Yeah, sure.
I think it's important for all people, regardless of their abilities, to learn about their body and how their body works and how they're feeling and what emotions they're feeling. But having an RSE as an education enables them to keep themselves safe, to be able to have safe and healthy relationships, both romantically or socially, to develop friendships and understand how they work and how acceptable behaviour within those relationships.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that relationships and sex education can be thought of in quite a narrow view, where they think it's we're teaching about how to have sex, or we're teaching specifically, and sometimes people get quite hung up about the sex part. But I do think that relationships and sex education is actually there's more than what meets the eye with that term, relationships and sex education. It actually reaches out to so many other areas, and we're talking about mental health, and we're talking about consent, and we're talking about online boundaries and healthy, unhealthy traits in relationships. And it's sort of, to me, the core of a lot of what it means to grow up and to become an adult and to live in society. So I think it's incredibly important, and everyone should learn about it. But then again, we are biased as well, aren't we? So
yeah.
we should be thinking that. Amazing. In terms of then some personal or general experiences relating to people with disabilities learning, or in some cases not learning, about relationships and sex at school or at home, what are your experiences with that?
At school, I learned basic things how to use a condom and when get pregnant. This wasn't enough for me. They don't talk about LGBT. There wasn't enough information about RSE. I would have to get to learn about the consent and LGBT. When I was younger, I saw two men kissing on EastEnders. I thought it's wrong because I have never seen this before, and I didn't understand two men kiss. It wasn't explained to me at school in RSE. I was listening the news and heard about a celebrity getting arrested and they're being falsely accused of rape. And I had to ask my dad what a consent meant. As I had never heard the word consent or rape. If I had learned about LGBT and consent, I would have had better understanding of what is right and wrong. I felt that it's important to use pictures, images, videos, and subtitles as you learn about RSE.
Yeah, absolutely. Tammy, do you have anything to add?
I think that previously in schools, it was mainly about function, that this isn't sex is an act and this is how it happens and this is how a woman gets pregnant. But as we know now, the subject is much more than that, and it's not just about the physical side of sex, it's all the stuff that's encompassed within that. So the feelings and how our bodies change and how we're feeling about other people and how we express ourselves. And I think that back in a few years back, that wasn't necessarily how that happened. So I do think that probably that was a bit of that. That was my experience anyway. When I was at school, we was just told to watch a video of a woman giving birth, and then that was our experience. And as a 11-year-old child, it was probably a little bit traumatic, but you know.
Yeah, and I think what you were saying, Richard, about LGBT representation as well, I think that actually a lot of the time on TV or in films, that was the first time, or in society when we're walking out and about with our parents or with our family, that might be the first time that we ever see an LGBT relationship. And if it's not been discussed or even presented to us as a reality or as a part of society, then it would be surprising. And for people who are LGBT as well, then can feel like, am I the only person? Is there something wrong? So us not talking about LGBT relationships or us not showing LGBT relationships in the vast diverse ways, it's not helpful.
I have to add, when I was in school at the time, we never talked about none of things like that, because in school, if you got caught being gay or lesbian or transgender, you'd be because, for example, if you see someone, like two boys hold hands kissing, at a time called batter man, batter woman, they'll be crucified.
Yeah.
And because at the time, I didn't understand it, because to me, that is lack of education of RSE. And to me, that is wrong with the treatment, because then it's not what's it called, explored it at the time. But at the time when I was in school, but nowadays, I reckon it's got better because people are out open now. So you say, yes, I'm gay, yes, I'm lesbian, they're more open. But back in my days in school, you can't be open because sometimes they have to keep their sexuality themselves, because that's how bad it is.
And I think as teachers and as educators, we have a responsibility, I think, to make sure that people in our schools and our classrooms feel safe, and to be able to speak about the fact that in society there are lots of different types of relationships, and people fall in love with different people, and I think that hopefully things are moving towards a place that's more positive and more acceptable and open for people. But there are definitely still lots of people who are not feeling supported by their teachers or by their parents or by their friends. So it's really important to make sure that our relationships and sex education is inclusive of LGBT relationships, for sure, because that is how that's what can happen, and we've seen it and we know that that's happened.
Yeah,
absolutely. Tammy, do you have anything else to add, just sort of relating to like personal experiences, general experiences of people with disabilities learning or not learning about relationships and sex?
I think obviously when I've met students, I'm their first experience of actually, rather than just seeing things on TV, being able to talk to somebody else, because maybe their parent or their supporter, they don't feel comfortable talking to them. So sometimes they're a little bit shocked and they don't really know what to expect, and they come in a bit scared, saying that we're coming in and doing some sex ed. And then once we get talking and they're comfortable, they realise actually that's nothing to be scared of. And I think that just breaking down that initial boundary is the first step. And once you've done that, they're so much more open to just absorbing all the information that you can give them. So that sort of is the best way, I think, just creating that initial step of stop, don't be scared, it's okay. A big plus.
And how this leads in perfectly to our next question, which is how to start those conversations and how to make relationships and sex more accessible, or education more accessible. So yeah, how do you break down those first initial boundaries?
Yeah, well, we just sort of say that everybody has the right to be in a relationship if they want to be. And then we start with the basics of like how the body works. And then we talk around what behaviours are acceptable in public places and private places. And then we talk about being safe with good and bad touch in relationships. And then those conversations naturally sort of lead on to other things. So then we can encompass the feeling. And then that brings in the consent part of the session, because you know that if you don't want somebody to touch you, then you're not giving them your consent. So they sort of naturally work on. And I think maybe a good support network for people to be able to have those open conversations, maybe with family or teachers, is good. Making it an environment where they feel safe, and that they feel like they can talk to you, because some places they can't talk, some people can't speak in front of others. You might need to sort of assess that they need a one-to-one, some more time. Making resources that are suitable, so maybe introducing with videos and making it a bit more interactive, because some people don't learn or want to take in information by just looking at paper or being talked at. It's got to be something that engages them so they learn. Initially, those conversations are pretty tricky to start, but sometimes you'll find that it's a lot easier than you would think, and it's mainly you being open to whatever conversations start and whatever's being said. So it's just got to make sure that you're not judgmental.
Yeah, thank you. That's really, really useful. Richard, do you have any tips on how to start conversations or how to make RSE more accessible?
Yes, Mencap doing a steering group, and it's important to get people talking about RSE. It helps people confident and comfortable in a space and for people to talk, which may help them feel better about themselves. And we set up ground rules that everyone knows to set a safe space and make them feel comfortable, and start with small activities to make people feel comfortable and to ease them into introduce themselves and into the group and welcome with.
I think ground rules, yeah, absolutely. Were you going to say something else about ground rules?
Ground rules is important because you know the rules and make them feel comfortable and keep it confidential. Confidential is very important because without confidential, they don't feel safe in it. But confidential is better. As myself have a culture, I enjoyed to share information about sex and RSE and sex education. To me, I'm proud that I did a good job to see how there's disability interact.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think explaining confidentiality and exactly what that means in different contexts, and sort of saying, actually, this is a space where, you know, if you say something, it doesn't go outside of this room. We don't notify people's parents or work or teachers if you share something. And then explaining that if you're worried about someone or if they're at any harm, then you will need to share it with someone, but you know, we'll talk to you first, or anything like that. I think sites having confidentiality policies when they're thinking of running relationships and sex education sessions is really, really important, and everyone knowing what confidentiality means is a good point. Absolutely. Yeah, and I think something else that I always try to talk about and speak about when we're talking about sex education is, for all types of sex education, we want to make sure that we're having balanced conversations about sex. So sometimes I think there can be a situation where we will speak about sex in sometimes quite a negative way, and saying, you know, there are all of these risks to sex, and you know, this is what's going to happen if you people have sex, and this and this. And actually, I think that, you know, we need to have those conversations about risks, for example, things like STIs, and we need to talk a bit about consent and all of that. But thinking about it also with the positives, and explaining that the reason that people have sex a lot of the time is for pleasure. Lots of people have sex because they want to have children sometimes, but plenty of people also have sex because they don't want children and because they're doing something that feels nice. And I think acknowledging that for most people is helpful and is a good outlook to have when we're talking about sex and relationships with everyone. So then, in terms of where we're going with this then, and like we spoke a little bit before about maybe what things were like for you, Richard, at school, and I think I related to that as well. When I was at school, LGBT sex education wasn't a thing, or sex education was a thing, but it was very much talking about what happens between a man and a woman, and it was not inclusive. Do we think that, how are things compared to years ago, and how are things now? Is there some positives? Do we see things improving, or is it the same as it was before?
Yes, no, because Mencap teaching RSE, more people in disability use read easy read guides, and no, because there still isn't enough easy read information out there. There still isn't enough time to give an RSE. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's not really, you know, even though we are having these conversations more, kind of, you were saying, actually we're not dedicating that much time to it necessarily. Sometimes, I don't know if you get this, Tammy, as well, but we do often come in and we've got 50 minutes to talk about, you know, STIs, contraception, consent, if you can throw it into, and actually these things do take time, and these conversations should not be one-off conversations. They should be continually happening with young people.
Yeah, and I find that some young people that you work with don't take all the information in at one time, so that repetition of going back over things is something that really helps with learning. I feel that there has been a big improvement over the years, but the students and families are more open and willing to talk about sex in a much more open fashion than they used to. But maybe due to social media influences or TV and things that children or young people are exposed to at a younger age. And I think that parents feel like that they need to protect their children from those sort of things. But with education, you're automatically protecting them because you're giving the information for them to keep themselves safe. And there are resources out there that are online for educators and parents and support workers to use, and they have been improved drastically. But as Richard says, Richard's finding it difficult to get enough easy read information that he can access. But there are lots of places where you can get that stuff, but obviously there's more that needs developing all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for sure. Richard, what do you think?
Okay, what I think is that time is important, because if you have time, it will be much easier. And some people are different. Some people are fast learners, some people are slow learners. Okay, like myself, I'm still learning, because that's the key thing. But without learning how to go, how to find educated in the best way, because then there is so much information out there to share. So that's the most important, is give more time and effort. So everyone's different. They might learn of a good knowledge of sets of things, and some people might not know what sets. So it's still more learning. Education is the key.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's our theme this year. This Sexual Health Week is the fact that we've got mandatory RSE that has come in and is now mandatory for everybody. From September, every school has to teach relationships and sex education, and they have to make it accessible, because it is everyone's right to be able to access that education. It's so important. And there is mention in the guidance about SEND schools and how to make things accessible, although there definitely is still lots of information that needs to be kind of given to teachers, and some teachers do still find it quite tricky to be able to make the education accessible, or to know at what stage of development to teach certain things. Is there any kind of tips or advice that you have for around that?
I think that sometimes teachers or people that are in close relationships with students or young people find that transition to talk about those things tricky, because their relationship's so close. But then maybe you might be able to sort of link in with another teacher, that you could do a swap over of students, so you are that one sort of step removed. But I think that by being open and talking about things openly in the right situations, and within confidentiality, obviously, it all comes with confidence. I think talking about, I mean, when I first started this job, I had no confidence in myself, and then thought, oh, am I going to be embarrassed? You know, what's going to happen? But once you get into that, over that first initial icebreaker, an icebreaker always helps, and then you're fine. You just run with it, and it just sort of comes naturally to you. So
yeah,
I do think that it's just that initial first step, and once you're past that initial first step, you'll be fine.
Yeah, absolutely. And we what were you going to say, Richard? Sorry.
I had to add something, because if you do teach them, make sure that one-to-one, because one-to-one is better. Because if you call it out in front of the class, they feel embarrassed. One-to-one is better. Have private sessions. That's the most important key. Because I wish I have one-to-one at the time, but at the time, everybody talk about sex, everybody talk about anything. And to me, I thought, I can't say this, but now I can speak up about it.
Yeah. And that really nicely links in with our last question, which is, what can we do as educators and professionals and people who work with young people to elevate young people's voices and make the relationships and sex education that we do teach as relevant and as useful as it can be? What do we think?
So I think that you should. Are you going first? Go on, Richard.
Okay. As I encourage them to speak up and talk about their own experiences, by speaking to them and answering questions, and teach some people how to speak up and give them guidance. The reason I say that is important. There's for confidence themselves. They're not feel shameful. Therefore, a good, nice voice, like myself and yourself, ever get a voice to speak up. That's the key.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I agree. So I think by having an open mind when you go into meeting any young person, have no judgments on them, by giving them the education and information that they need to be able to make decisions, informed decisions, by allowing them, giving them the information so they can express their self and their sexuality and make choices about types of relationships they want to be in. Using the social media as a platform for education is going to be, going forward, the main sort of thing to do, I think, because so many young people use social media and it's sometimes viewed in a negative way around sex, but it could be used for such positive things. And I think by including the young people in development around resources of finding out and listening to what they need and what they want to know, to be able to give them that information in an accessible form.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that we mentioned it before as well, I think around confidence and having that confidence to talk about these topics with our young people. And I think a lot of that can come from practice and training, and also evaluating our own personal values and our own personal beliefs about this topic, and making sure that we don't bring those personal things into the classroom necessarily, and having that distinction there, so that we don't make assumptions about our young people, and so that we can make sure that we're giving them what they need and making it relevant to them, because it's not really about us at all.
No.
When we're teaching about relationships and sex education. Yeah, absolutely. And I think we've kind of like touched on it a lot throughout this whole conversation, actually, which is like going at the learner's pace and not overwhelming people, because actually it's what you were saying, Richard, about time. It's like, if you dedicate the time to this topic, I think that's when you can get the most out of it, and the young people can get the most out of it, because then you are going at their pace a little bit better, and they're not feeling overwhelmed by the information, and maybe just sort of clarifying those key messages. What do you want them to take away from this particular subject? Do we need to come back to it? And having that flexibility as well.
And I think that once you start with that conversation, you naturally get an idea for if that person's needs some more time with that subject. So you might need to do sort of some one-to-one work if the rest of the group's moving at a different pace. Excuse me. So, but I think that as you're talking about that with people, you as an educator or a trainer would pick that up and then know that you need to sort of just reword things and sort of change things up a little bit. But that just comes with confidence in yourself and your own ability as well. So
yeah, we could talk about this topic forever, and I would love to talk to both of you about this more and more, but unfortunately that's all we have time for. But thank you to everyone who is watching, and I hope that it was helpful to hear us talking about this topic, and particularly talking about it in relation to young people with disabilities, people with disabilities generally. So yeah, thank you so much for clicking on this video and coming to see it. And in terms of both of you from Mencap, is there anything that you would like to link to, or how can people get more information about Mencap?
There's lots of information on the Mencap website. I'm sure if you just give it a click, and there's lots of stuff about relationships. So yeah, just visit the Mencap website.
Yeah, there's so much great stuff on there, and you've got a wonderful batch of resources as well, don't you, about relationships and how to make it accessible, the lesson plan.
Yeah, there's lots of information and about projects that are running and stuff. So yeah, just give it a go.
Yeah, amazing.
And most important is be safe and enjoy yourself. Sexual health.
Yeah, it's a fun topic to teach, and have fun with it. It's not super serious. There are parts of it that are super serious, but have fun. I think that's the best way to go into our education. So thank you so much. The Brook website also has lots of really useful information for the whole week. This week we're talking all things mandatory RSE. We've got lots of other talks going on, and follow us on Instagram, Brook's sex positive _, Brook Charity on Facebook and Twitter. We have e-learning platforms on our website as well, so if you can't get out to a training at the moment because of face-to-face delivery, we've got lots of online resources for people, educators, to learn more about this topic. So thank you very much. See you.
Bye.
Thank you.